And now it is time for our second candidate. Let me introduce Mike DeWine, the Republican nominee for Ohio Governor and currently Ohio's Attorney General.
Good? Yep, good to see you, Pat. Good to see you. I'm here.
Mike DeWine cares deeply about children and families, and specifically for kids growing up in Ohio who, because of no fault of their own, simply do not have the same chances for success in life as their peers. As governor, Mike DeWine will do everything in his power to create change and provide more opportunity for those children. Mike DeWine and John Husted are ready to fight for an Ohio that works for all families. Mike DeWine has made promoting strong families and children his top priority throughout his career, including supporting health and wellness, protecting children from abuse, and backing strong schools. In the very first policy announcement of his campaign for governor, Mike DeWine rolled out his plan, Opportunity for Every Ohio Kid. The children-focused agenda will improve access and increase quality of early childhood education services, increase home visiting services for at-risk first-time mothers, and dedicate more funding to the state's foster care system, which lags behind the nation. Mr. Mike DeWine knows that the failure of Ohio's children is a tragedy that affects all of us and has a plan to ensure every Ohio child has the opportunity to live a healthy and fulfilled life, succeed in their education, and grow up to live the American dream. Mike and Fran DeWine have 8 children and 23 grandchildren and reside in Cedarville, Ohio. Welcome, Mr. DeWine. Well, my first question is, why do you vote for Ohio Kids?
Well, first of all, thank you all for inviting us here today, and thank you for all you do for children. Children can't vote, and because they cannot vote, I think it's incumbent upon us as adults to make sure in public policy that they are well represented. We're all, I think, a product of our past and kind of who we are. You just heard Fran and I have 8 children waiting for the birth in a few months of our 24th grandchild. And so, when I see kids who are in difficult situations, where my mind goes is that might have been my child, or that might be my grandchild. And so this is, so very, very important that we do what we can to help children and, frankly, make it a priority. This is really the number one reason I run for governor, is because of my passion for children and what we need to do. I started my career as a county prosecuting attorney. Actually started as an assistant county prosecutor. And literally the first case I had was a children's services case. County prosecutor represented children's services. And what I saw as a prosecutor and what happens to some children, the abuse that they suffer, frankly shaped how I look at many, many, many things. Later, I was in the state Senate. Shortly after I was elected, a little 7-year-old boy, a little boy by the name of Justin Beeson, was killed. Killed by a drunk driver, killed 8 o'clock in the morning, right in front of his school bus, in front of his school as he was getting off a bus. Grandfather came to me and said, can't you do something about the drunk driving? So I wrote the first really tough drunk driving law Ohio had, and we got it passed. And I did that really in memory of Justin Beeson, because we didn't want other families to go through that. In the United States Senate, I really spent a lot of time working on children's issues. Those of you from children's hospitals know that when I was able to get on the Appropriations Committee, I know this is a bad word today, but earmarks, but we were able to get earmarks for some of our children's hospitals and for some specific programs. Every year we battled the graduate medical education money. It seemed like it didn't make any difference whether it was a Republican or Democrat administration. They took money out and zero funded it every year, and we had to put that back in and fight for that every single year, and I did. Throughout my career, I've worked in a bipartisan way. As governor, I will work in a bipartisan way in pulling people together. I've always been good about pulling people together. A couple of examples from my tenure in the United States Senate. We went out to children's hospitals and pediatricians around the state and said, what challenges are you having? And one of the things that we heard was that when new drugs were coming on the market, new drugs were being tested, many times they were not tested for children. And because they weren't tested for children, pediatricians frankly did not know what the dosage should be. And so they were either over-prescribing, under-prescribing, or in many cases they weren't doing anything at all because they were afraid to do it. And so I partnered with Chris Dodd, Democrat from Connecticut, and a series of 3 separate bills. We were able to change that. And now hundreds and hundreds of these new medicines are actually tested for kids. And so made a huge, huge difference. In regard to school safety, I worked with Jay Rockefeller, Democrat from West Virginia at the time. School bus safety. We worked on that. We worked on safety in regard to cars, particularly in regard to children. The AIDS epidemic, when I was in the Senate, was full-blown around the world. And one of the things I'm very proud of is that I worked with Democrats and Republicans alike to get more money to help moms so that they could take the medicine before the baby was born, so that the odds of that child being born addicted went down dramatically. So this is my passion. This is why I run. I know in the later questions we're going to have an opportunity to talk about some of the specific issues and things that I want to do as governor. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. And the first question from the panelists will be from Pat Tibieri.
Ohio has one of the worst infant mortality rates in the country, ranking 41st in the country. We also see severe racial disparities in our state, with black babies dying at almost 3 times the rate of white babies. If elected governor, how will you work to ensure that pregnant mothers have access to prenatal care to improve birth outcomes, and what other supports do you envision as part of your plan to ensure that more children in Ohio live to celebrate their first birthday?
Well, Pat, this is a tragedy, and we should be shocked by the numbers that we see. The numbers we see, particularly among African American children, moms. But it's not just African American, it cuts across. And it's not just in our inner cities. We see it in our Appalachian counties. We see it in some of our more affluent counties. Every single county in the state, no matter where you live, has got moms who are in that situation. I would invite you, when you leave, to take a look at what we have put forward, John Husted and I, and what we want to do when I'm governor. It's a real specific agenda. And the first initiative that we actually rolled out was our Children's Initiative. And you can, by the way, you can see that. Just go up on the web page, MikeDewine.com, and you can look at the different things that we're going to do. My experience has been the first 100 days, 120 days of an administration is when you really get moving. And if you don't get moving in that time period, you're not going to really make the difference. And so we've laid out exactly what we want to do beginning January 14th. Let me just tell you about what we want to do. There are great models out there. Cincinnati Children's has a great model in regard to home visits. I don't think there's anything any more important than ramping up this program. This is a program that now covers only about 4% of the eligible families. Most of you are very familiar with the program, but the whole idea is to reach out to that mom prenatal, before the baby is born, long before the baby is born, and try to give her holistic services, help her with health, if she's on drugs, if she's smoking, if she's doing other things, to try to work with her in regard to that. And then after the baby is born, that process continues, and the more that the father can be involved as well, it's very, very, very important. John Husted and I are going to triple that program the first year. We're going to go from 4% to 12%. In dollars, that's going from $20 million to $60 million. The only thing that frankly stopped us from going further is we don't know if the capacity is there to do all of that in the first year. But there are models out there. I think that children's hospitals around the state, we are really blessed with great children's hospitals. We probably have more than virtually any state in the union, and they're good. and they make a huge difference. They're institutions that really work. So as we look at rolling this out to beyond 4% and continue, we hope to continue each year to raise that number. As I said, we'll start trying to get first year at 12%, and then we'll just try to keep going from there. But using children's hospitals and working with children's hospitals is certainly a way that we think we can use an institution that really works and works very, very well, institutions that work and work very well.
Debbie, what is your question?
Continuing on the healthcare front, the research is clear that healthy children do better in school and grow up to be healthy, productive adults. In Ohio, Medicaid covers more children than any other healthcare provider, nearly half of Ohio's kids. If elected governor, how will you work to ensure that children are a priority in our Medicaid program, including having access to the comprehensive, stable healthcare coverage that they need to thrive?
Well, Debbie, thank you very much. Let me first say a couple things about Medicaid that are not in direct answer to your question, but I want to make it very, very, very clear. John Husted and I will continue the Medicaid expansion. We think that is very, very important. We will add to that. The governor has already sought a waiver in regard to a work requirement, but as for able-bodied adults. But we will add to that a wellness component. A wellness component. We've made some progress in the last few years, but we have to get really, really serious about wellness for our entire Medicaid population and start early. The other thing I would mention and make sure that it's really, really clear to everyone, because there are a few ads on TV that say otherwise. But I am very dedicated and always have been very dedicated to making sure that someone who has a pre-existing illness, pre-existing medical problem, that they are able to get the coverage that they need. So that's something that I'm very, very, very much dedicated to, and we will make sure that continues to happen. I think there's a great opportunity in regard to Medicaid, Deb, to work closer between our schools and Medicaid. We've got some great examples around the state for that's working. The Euler School, for example, in the Cincinnati area is one example. I've had the opportunity to tour the school and see the kind of the wraparound services that are available. I think we can become more creative in regard to Medicaid. Why the schools? The schools are a logical place. That's where all the children are. It's where we have the opportunity to make sure they have good medical care. It also presents, frankly, an opportunity to wrap services around these children. Mental health services are very, very important. One of the things that we have committed to do is to make sure there's a mental health specialist available to every child and every teacher in the state of Ohio. This is just very important. It's important, number one, so that we can see if a teacher sees a problem with a child, that early on we can get that child the mental health help that they need. Some of the horrible tragedies that we have seen with school shootings and other things, there were signs early on with that particular person, that particular child, and the signs many times were not paid much attention to. And so having every child in every school have access to a mental health specialist who can then refer to someone else in the community if that is what is appropriate, work with the parents. I think that is very important. It's also very important because for whatever reason, we're seeing a number of our children who are quite fragile. I think some of the saddest things that I have seen is when you hear about a 10-year-old or 11-year-old who commits suicide. There's just nothing sadder as a parent to contemplate than that. And so we want to work in that area. And again, that's the other thing that will be helped by having someone who's a mental health specialist, every child has access to that. But again, conclusion, Medicaid, we've got to be more robust. We've got to be more creative in how we use Medicaid to help and get the services directly to kids. And many times the best way to deliver those services is in the schools and make it a collaborative effort.
And the next question will be from David.
Yeah, so I'm in the business community every day talking to small business, and the number one challenge that I hear on a regular basis is filling open jobs, right? And yet less than 2% of the state budget is spent in pre-K, which I look as being that funnel that's going to fill the workforce of tomorrow. So my question is this. So in Ohio, only 40% of our kids are entering kindergarten ready to learn. And we know that these kids who start behind typically stay behind, demonstrating lower academic performance throughout school and decreased rates of post-secondary attainment and therefore workforce readiness. If elected governor, what are your plans to ensure that every child gets the experiences they need to ensure they're set up for success?
Great question. I want for every child in this state what I want for my own children and I want for my own grandchildren. And I know what you want for your children and grandchildren. And that is you want them to be happy. And you know for them to be happy, they need to find a passion in life, something that they care passionately about, that they do and that they do well. So that's my goal for every child. We want every child to graduate from high school truly college ready, or on a pathway to a career, maybe through a vocational school experience, maybe through an apprenticeship, other things. But to get there, we've got to do a better job reaching our at-risk kids. We have kids growing up in this state in very difficult circumstances. We have kids growing up in poverty. Something that I see all the time is kids who are growing up and they have one or both parents who are drug addicts. We've got children who are going into foster care because of that situation. Our foster care system is really bursting at the seams with kids. If we are to reach these kids, there has to be intervention in their life, because tragically, for many of them, if there is not an intervention in their lives, they will not be able to truly live the American dream and to do the things that we all think people should be able to do and have great opportunities. So, in addition to dramatically increasing home visits, and I won't repeat what I said, but that is essential, because what happens before that child is born directly impacts where they are when they start kindergarten, and that directly impacts where they are, where they can read by third grade, and whether they're going to graduate. So it all goes back. There's nothing more important than early childhood development. So in addition to tripling what we are doing currently in our first year in regard to these home visits, we are going to work very hard to dramatically increase the number of children who are eligible for vouchers to go to pre-K, to go into the classes, into the schools. We will increase that the first year by 20,000. We'll go from 130% poverty to 150% poverty. But the other thing that we're going to do is probably more difficult, but we're going to put a lot of resources in it and a lot of effort in it. And that is to make sure that every child who is going to a preschool situation has a school that is a high-quality school. The evidence clearly shows that if the school is not a high-quality school, that I wouldn't say we're wasting our money, but the results really come from high quality. And the high quality really goes, it covers a lot of different things, but I think the most important thing it covers is to have teachers who are well-trained, teachers who are passionate, and teachers who get the job done there. And so we currently, 80% of the children who the state is paying for to go into these schools, 80% of those children are in schools that are not high performing. So that's the first thing that we have to change. And our goal is to have every child into a high performing school. When we do that, some of these schools, it is helping not just children who are poor, it's helping other children who are there as well, because you're increasing the quality. So we're going to make a great effort to do that. Again, I would ask you to look at MikeDewine.com. We spell that out in pretty good detail exactly what we're going to do. Let me mention one other thing that I think is should be very concerning to us, and that is the lead paint problem. Decades after we knew the problem, we still have children whose responses and whose cognitive ability has been impacted by the fact that they have lead paint poisoning. I will direct my director of health to make this a priority. We are a local government state, and most services are delivered locally. And I not only do I understand that, I think that's good, but we can help from the state level. We can be partners. And so this is an area where I intend to put a lot of emphasis and to work with our local health departments, particularly those in our urban settings where we see this problem. It's at its absolute worst. Prevention is the key. We're doing some things afterwards, but we got to get in front of this.
Alex, please ask your question.
So I'm going to come back to the topic of mental and behavioral health. If I left here today and saw a neighbor and told them that my daughter had cancer, I would almost inevitably get a hug. If I told that same neighbor that she was depressed or suicidal, there would more likely than a hug be an awkward silence. We know in this great state that 1 in 7 children have had 3 or more adverse childhood experiences that are impacting their emotional and mental well-being. We know that in this great state, 50% of all lifetime mental illnesses are diagnosed by the age of 14. And tragically, the second leading cause of death in this state among teenagers is to suicide. If elected governor, what are your plans to minimize instances of these adverse childhood experiences? And what plans do you have to bolster mental health and prevention? You talked about some of those in the schools, and love to hear other ideas and commitment to mental health.
Alex, thank you very much. This is a huge, huge problem, and as a parent, as a grandparent, it's just a very, very scary thing. We held a conference a number of months ago on this exact topic of trauma. I've looked at the numbers and I've looked at how Ohio compares with other states, and we don't compare very well. We know that statistically, the more of these incidents that a child has, the more trauma that child has, the more difficult it is for that child. So, again, to repeat, we'll have someone available, and the state will pay for it, because I think it's so very, very important that every child in the state of Ohio in school will have access to someone who is a mental health specialist. We see this. I see this a lot because of the drug problem in regard to children's services and the kids in foster care. A child who is taken out of a home, that's trauma. Even if it was the right thing to do, it's still trauma. The child is traumatized by changing that home. We've seen situations in foster care where children have been in 17, 18, 19 homes. I just cannot imagine how bad that would be for a child. So one of the things we're going to do is we're going to listen to the experts. We have a lot of experts out here, but we're going to really focus on foster care. It's one of the things I've done as Attorney General, something that I worked on when I was in the United States Senate in regard to adoption and Safe Families Act, but it's something that we're going to work on when I become governor of the state, because we have to try to minimize those adverse experiences that children have. This is not in the realm of the Attorney General, but we were able to take some settlement money, and we were able to create in Ohio on a trial basis a program that we call START. It is now in 17 different counties. And what we do it is give those counties the resources And by the way, the only reason it's a trial basis pilot project is I didn't have enough money to do the whole state. And my commitment is when I'm governor, we will do this in the whole state. But what we do is two things. When a child is taken out of a home because a parent is an addict, we need to surge resources around that child because that child we know has already experienced at least two traumas. So we surge in resources to that child, to help that child, and those certainly include mental health. At the same time, because it's so important, if that family can be put back together, that family should be put back together. Again, that minimizes the problems with the child. We do wraparound services for that parent. If they're willing to try to get into treatment, we get them into treatment. And that program is a program that has worked in the past and appears to be working in Ohio. We're going to double it in the Attorney General's office here shortly. We're going to make that official announcement in a few days. But when I'm governor, we're going to do that in every county of the state. Another thing that we're going to do in every county of the state, if I could just mention this, we have another pilot program. Again, it's only a pilot program because we didn't have enough money to cover the whole state. But it is to help Children's Services when a child has to be removed from a home. It is to put somebody in that Children's Services whose sole job it is to try to find where that child, the circle of that child's life, and find somebody that child can go live with who is in the area, but is also someone who has already had contact with the child. Again, that minimizes the trauma. It's a program that works very well. Sometimes they find a coach, sometimes they find a teacher, but there's putting a real emphasis on that. And so we're going to do that statewide as well. And this final comment in regard to our child welfare system and Children's Services. We are last in the union on the amount of money the state pays and puts forward in regard to these kids. We have to dramatically increase that. I've really hesitated to make specific pledges and talk about money because I'm not exactly sure what budget that we're going to be living with or what the economy is going to be when I become the governor of the state. But one area where I have promised is in regard to Children's Services. It is wrong that we are last in the union. Half of our counties, roughly, do not have a local levy. And I've often said to directors of Children's Services, my God, you don't have a levy, how do you get by? And what many of them have told me is, we don't. We really don't. So we got to fix that. We got to fix that, and we will fix that.
Michael, please ask your question.
As you know, we are here today to talk about a group of young people who can't vote, who are too often forgotten about when tough decisions, particularly around budget priorities and policy initiatives. We are excited that you are here today to talk about your plans with us for our kids in this state. But our ultimate goal is to see that these plans are translated into real investments and a real sound policy. As I shared with the other candidate, I got a tweet from a school district board member in Cincinnati, and he asked if you were elected governor, how will you make sure that the youngest, the most vulnerable residents of our state are a priority in your administration?
Well, they're going to be a priority because I'm going to say they're a priority. Look, it starts from the top. The culture of any organization, and we got great organizations represented out here, it starts from the top, and that culture has to be driven down. I will set the priority for my administration. My number one priority is children. My number one priority is early childhood development. These are things that where we know, based on evidence, that if we do A, B, C, we will get results. This is not 20 years ago or 40 years ago or 50 years ago when we did not know what was going to work. We know what works today. And so by using evidence-based programs and frankly putting the money where our mouth is, we will start making some changes. Now, it won't be as fast as I want. I'm a very impatient person, as you can ask any of my staff or ask my poor wife who's put up with me for 51 years. I want things overnight. But, just on the home visits, we're going to go from 4% the first year to 12%, but that's not the end. We want to continue to grow. We also have to do this in partnership with existing organizations that are out there. And that's why I said earlier that the children's hospitals are certainly one organization, but there are many others out here who we want to work with. Let me mention something else. I am a good listener. Many things that I've gotten done throughout my career have not been my ideas. They have been ideas of someone who knew more than I did about the particular subject. But I've always told my team, go out and find people who know more than we know about this subject. And so my invitation to all of you is that when I become governor of the state, or you can start before, reach out to us. I don't know where Leanne is, Leanne Cornyn, who many of you know, but when I became Attorney General, I created a position, and that position is head of children's initiatives in the Attorney General's office. Not normally what you think of the Attorney General doing, but I'm so passionate about that. So Leanne, if she is willing to do that, will be doing that in that position when I'm the governor of the state. And so she's someone who you can get in contact, or you can get in contact with any of our team. But we will lead, but we will also seek out opinions of people like you in the room who have a specialty, who understand how things really work. I have the passion, you help us with the information, we'll get it done.
Michael, please ask your follow-up question.
So, Attorney General, can you give us a little bit more specifics around what you would do for traditionally African-American kids underperform in our state, and poor white kids in rural areas? What would you do as governor specifically to address those issues?
Great question. When I send my budget, my school funding budget up, it will have a priority for our poorest children. It will have that priority because we know for a fact that while money doesn't solve every problem, and sometimes it does not, and doesn't always mean that if you put money somewhere, something's going to happen, but we do know that poorer children, disadvantaged children, take more services, take more help. And the good news is that once that happens, they can be on a level playing field. They can compete with anybody. It is not a question of, it really is a question of developing their potential and giving them the opportunity to get to the starting line. And so I look at this, we got to get them, first of all, to the starting line. And that goes back to the mom when she's pregnant with the baby. It goes to the early years. Is that child read to? Is that child getting the nutrition? All the things that you all know so very well. So in my education budget, the education budget for over 600 school districts, that will be a priority. It's one thing, though, to have ideas. It's another thing to be able to get them done. I have a proven record of getting things done. I do it by working with people. I do it by working with people of both parties. I do it by working with people who have different backgrounds. And so these things will be a priority for me. And one of the things I've always told my team is, look, there's certain calls that only the boss can make. There's certain things that only the boss can do. So when it's time to talk to legislators, and we have great respect for the state legislature, when it's time to talk to them about our budget, about things that we put in our budget that we want to keep in our budget, and we don't want them taken out of the budget, I will be very active in talking with them, because I think when people understand the importance of early childhood development, when they understand the importance of reaching our poorest children, when they understand the importance of reaching our most disadvantaged children, they come along. It's the right thing to do. But I also tell people, okay, if that's not enough for you because it's the right thing to do, let me add something else. And I'll say this to middle-class people, families, and somebody who maybe they're having a little difficult time seeing the importance of what I'm talking about. I said, look, how our children who are the most disadvantaged, who are the poorest children, giving them a good opportunity is good for everybody. It will increase the quality of life for everyone. It will give them a chance to be creative. It will give them a chance to live their own American dream. And because they have the chance to do that, because they have the chance to live that dream and to live up to their full potential, our state will have the chance to live up to its full potential. If we leave these kids back, we're never going to go where we want to go in Ohio. We still have too many of them. We've come a long way. We've made great progress in the last 8 years, but we now got to double down and say, look, we're serious. We're going after these kids, and we're going to work in every community to do it. And the governor is going to use the bully pulpit of the office to talk about these kids all the time.
And in an effort for nonpartisanship and giving both candidates the same amount of time, Mr. DeWine is out of time. But we would like to thank Mr. DeWine for coming here today and for our great panelists.
Again, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good to be with you. Good to see you. Thank you very much. Thank you.